Good evening and welcome to Grace Gavel, where truth meets compassion. My name is Buffy. I'm an 18-year criminal defense attorney, as well as a compassionate person who has always been interested in victims and survivors' rights, from representing women in domestic violence situations to sexual assault situations and the various gambit. So today we're going to talk about Elisa Lam. Elisa Lam's death has been framed as mysterious, paranormal, and criminal. But when you strip away internet mythology, what remains is a case rooted in mental health, institutional responsibility, and the evidentiary limits of criminal law. Let's talk about who Elisa Lam was. She was 21 years old. She was a Canadian citizen, a University of British Columbia student, and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, which makes this rooted in mental health. And our country, honestly, does not handle mental health well. There are a lot of people who are quietly suffering. I know when I lived in Florida for a while, that their solution to the homeless issue was to prosecute the homeless for burglary, dwelling somewhere that was not their property, so that they could then transport them to jail or prison, whatever it was. A lot of the homeless people in Florida actually had several burglary convictions, and not for actually committing burglary, but for being in a dwelling that was owned by another person because it was hot or cold or whatever it was, which I think is extremely sad. So I have a lot of compassion for people who are struggling with mental illness and may not have the resources to be able to get the help that they need. And this is one of those cases. She also was a blogger. She was very open about her mental health struggles on her blog. She decided to travel alone on a West Coast trip. She was staying at the Cecil Hotel, which is known for a long history of crime, a transient population. Again, not that transients are bad, just giving the history of the hotel, prior suicides and violent incidents. And my thought is, did she actually know what she was getting into? Had she researched this? Given the fact that she was from British Columbia, she wasn't from the United States. And this is a matter for foreseeability and duty of care. I would almost argue that there should have been some sort of, we're not all responsible for the actions of others, but I don't know. I just feel like there's a lot of things that could have gone differently. And so does the hotel maybe owe her a standard of care? I don't know. Whether they had a duty to know. I think that it depends on, she's in a different country. She was taking different risks, So again, I think it's a very unfortunate, tragic story. So let's talk about her timeline. Elisa arrived in Los Angeles on January 26, 2013. She was initially placed in a shared hostel-style room. Roommates report erratic behavior, which goes with bipolar, the kind of manic phase, and all of that is probably what she was going into. Then she was moved into a private room. Elevator video recorded that same day. Elisa appears disoriented. She's pressing multiple buttons. She steps in and out, and she makes unusual hand movements. LAPD releases videos with altered timestamps. To me, this is a really confusing thing about the altered timestamps. So are we to believe that there was some potential activity that caused them to decide to alter this video? As a criminal defense attorney, I would be jumping up and down on this issue because there is really no good excuse to alter anything, especially because once things are altered, you're not going to be able to change the alterations that have been made. And what was the motive for altering the timestamps? LAPD, you guys have a long history of doing things that are untoward. And this is just another example that kind of raises eyebrows. I mean, I don't know who decided to alter this. We don't know that. I don't know why they would decide to alter that. Again, I mean, that's a very disturbing question. Unless in some way maybe it showed maybe the perpetrator was in there with her, if there was a perpetrator. Again, this case is rife with so many unknowns. On February 19th, a body was discovered in a rooftop water tank. Hotel guests complained of low water pressure, darkened water, and an unusual taste. Now imagine, I've actually watched the Hotel Cecil documentary, and imagine realizing that there was a dead body in the water tank that you were brushing your teeth with, that you were showering with, that you may have been drinking. That, I think, is something that would definitely scar someone for life. Seriously. So let's talk about the autopsy and the forensics here, the key facts. Her cause of death was accidental drowning. Her manner of death was an accident, is what they're saying. Which, if you think about it, given the fact of what we can see from the video, her hand movements, her erratic behavior, her going in and out of the hotel, like in and out of the elevator, could she have been in a manic phase? Sure. Could she have thought maybe she was in a paranoid phase and thought somebody was chasing her or something like that? So she thought that potentially she would be able to maybe climb up on the roof and be safe. I mean, we really don't know. I mean, it's almost like a speculation, but it's a kind of conjecture here because unfortunately Elisa isn't here with us to tell us like what she was going through and what her actual thoughts were. There are no signs of sexual assault, no signs of blunt force trauma, or no defensive injuries. So it's likely, and the other thing you kind of think about is the lid on the top of that. I think, wouldn't that be difficult to be able to get off on her own? I would think. I don't know. So toxicology indicates that prescription meds were present when she was prescribed those, but not all at therapeutic levels. And it also suggests non-compliance with her meds or irregular intake, which could have been another thing that spiked her episode that she had. There was no alcohol or illicit drugs detected. So ultimately, the absence of trauma, sexual assault, blunt force, defensive injuries, strongly limits the possibility of being able to do a criminal case or criminal investigation. Not only that, but it would be extremely difficult given the fact that there's altered video, given the fact that she was traveling alone. No one is going to know who had access to Elisa. Criminal unknown facts. And this is where people want to speculate. How she accessed the hotel roof. Whether roof alarms were installed, functioning, monitored. And this could potentially be a premises liability issue for the hotel. But the hotel's been there for a long time. Who knows if someone's going to actually go after that. And then also how she was able to access the water tank. Lids were reportedly heavy. Conflicting accounts about whether or not it was open. That would be a very important fact to have. But again, I mean, that's kind of long gone at this point because no one really knows and who was looking for someone in a water tank. And then also whether the staff actually followed the Cecil's internal policies and their safety protocols. And then we also, like I mentioned, we want to know why the police edited the video timestamps before they released them. That makes no sense. If you're looking for what actually happened, you're not going to doctor something that is going to be the definitive evidence that you have. Let's talk about suspects and liability. There were no criminal suspects because, as we mentioned, there was nothing to indicate that somebody else had harmed her. There's no evidence placing another person with her. But the case shifts from criminal law to civil liability, especially if the lid was off, especially if they're not following their procedures. I mean, that is clearly negligence. I mean, are they going to go to prison for that? Absolutely not. But you're looking more at maybe a civil liability case here. And the civil lawsuit alleged negligent security, unsafe premises. Unfortunately, the lawsuit was ultimately dismissed. Theories. Psychotic episode is the official theory. She did have bipolar disorder and she was inconsistent with her medication. Again, not blaming the victim, not saying that it's her fault that this happened to her. That is absolutely not who I am. But I'm saying that that kind of is the basis maybe for what had her climb all the way up there. And if you haven't watched that documentary, I would definitely recommend watching that documentary to kind of see just how scary it is, and also maybe how ill-informed Elisa was before she traveled to the Hotel Cecil. And from my understanding of Canada, it's very vast and, you know, much different than the United States. So she may have also been kind of in culture shock too. So that could potentially be it. But you think about once she's like climbed that, I mean, the disorientation level, the struggle she's already going through as it is, I mean, what more is that going to do to her? As well as impulsive behavior, and then there's no third-party evidence. But the negligence theory, I mean, the hotel clearly had known risks. I mean, there was violence there. There was a large transients population. Again, not saying all transients are bad, not saying anybody's bad, but just saying that was present. She was in a large city. You know, I mean, generally with larger cities, you have more crime activity. And then the whole like roof access just defies imagination, to be honest with you. That's just really not safe. And then you think about the guest safety obligations. I mean, there should have been a lid on that. There should have been, I mean, no one should be able to lift the lid off that thing or get in there because the lid is not on there. And then you think about the poor